see here. We're live now. Good to see you. I always like doing these live streams. We get to know each other a little bit more. There's a lot of stuff going on today, and a bunch of different stories that I want to talk about with you. A couple previews, rate cuts. Obviously, you've seen it on there. Some expectations that those rate cuts could be coming. Some commentary from some of the top finance officials at some of the big banks. Now, how much we can trust them. That's another thing to talk about. Also, the $3 billion Ukraine deal, we're going to talk about that. There's a lot of different takes on that support that was announced today with the Prime Minister and Freeland in Ukraine, as well as a potential extension for Trudeau. Well, we thought that, hey, maybe the government is going to come crumbling down as a result of the supply and confidence agreement getting sort of cut off between the NDP and the Liberals, but it seems like that might not happen. But there is a coincidence with February 29th that has some people thinking Trudeau could step down entirely. I'm not so convinced. Also, stuff about the Emergencies Act a trial that's going on, as well as a lawsuit that's come up. Interesting stuff there, and some other goodies at the end to get into. Let me know where you're tuning in from, how you're doing. I want to start with the talk of rate cuts. Obviously, the Bank of Canada has been sort of teasing Canadians for a while, saying, "Hey, we're thinking about or cutting rates. We're pausing now. We're going to wait and sort of see if we can bring down rates without inflation coming back and causing sort of a double dip recession like we had in the 70s, or if inflation comes down, jobs numbers are on track, we can sort of lower rates and pump up the economy again." Let's get into that. Hey, Candace from Mountain Finance, good to see you in here. I always like to tune into your live streams when they're going on as well. Hello from Victoria, BC. We've got Matt and Leaf and Ashley and Tommy. Join us in the chat if you're watching and you're not already in on this. Great to see everyone here. Let's get right into it, because we've got a chief economist, Jimmy Jean, from Desjardins, projecting when this first rate cut could come, and we'll talk about all of the implications, what could actually happen in Canada as a result of that. I see Jason here saying, "Hey, Russell, if they decide to cut rates, doesn't that mean bad news from the economy ahead?" To a certain extent, yeah, we're going to get into that in a second, Jason. But yeah, if rates come down, well, that means maybe the Bank of Canada sees something that we don't in the future. But let me flip over here and let's get right into it.
You take a look at that recent data, the inflation numbers for January, the preliminary GDP data, jobs report. Does all of this equal the target range where the Bank of Canada feels comfortable to start cutting rates?
Yeah, right. We believe we are slowly but surely heading in that direction, where the Bank of Canada will be comfortable delivering the first rate cuts. We talked about the job market recently, which maybe was stronger than expected, but not nearly as strong, such as to fit with the dizzying pace of population expansion. So, in fact, you're seeing some slack building up in the labor market. So that's disinflationary. And, we saw this number today with inflation coming in below expectations. But really, when you drill down, what you see is that the consumer categories, the clothing, the food, the airfares, those are coming down pretty sharply. And that's really what the Bank of Canada wants to see in terms of its response, in terms of the economy's response to its monetary policy. So we are seeing that. And I think by spring, the Bank of Canada will start to provide some respite.
Okay, so this guy's saying by spring, by April is when we should see a rate cut. People were or not, maybe not by April, June, April. I guess that's kind of spring, but April is when a lot of people were originally predicting it. Now we've seen a little bit of real estate sales data saying, okay, things have picked up a little bit here in the first quarter of the year, because people are trying to sort of get ahead of the Bank of Canada, try to get back into the market before rate cuts come and potentially send real estate prices higher. Of course, nobody knows what's going to happen, right? But we've got SF here saying, are the rates going to go lower as much as they were supposed to stay low? Fair enough. Yeah, that's the thing. You can't really you got to take everything with a grain of salt. What people are saying, especially central bankers, well, there's a reason they're saying the things that they're saying at any given point.
I want to talk about that jobs picture, because we have been hearing and seeing. It seems more and more private companies are right across various sectors across Canada have been laying off workers. What does that jobs picture look like then for the balance of the year? Is it, should we expect more to come?
Well, we're seeing some slack building up, that's for sure. And, you're in a context right now where the job vacancy rate has pretty much returned to where it was pre-pandemic. And we continue to have a very strong pace of population expansion. So what that means is that you have more people looking for jobs at the minimum. And yes, you have some sectors, some industries where you are seeing some layoffs. So all that is consistent with a labor market that has been building more slack throughout 2023. And the evidence so far in 2024 is that this is continuing. And I think ultimately over time, and that's what we see in every cycle, is that it ends up breaking the persistence you see in wages, but with a certain lag. So I don't think this time is different on that front. We will see wages start to come down to reflect that, and that will provide the Bank of Canada with further confidence that it's time to cut rates.
That's the thing that I always think is so messed up. Let me know if you agree with me. It seems like the central bankers and politicians are all looking at wage growth, right, as a sort of proxy for the inflation that we're going to see. Thinking like, okay, if companies need to raise wages for their workers, well, then that's going to be inflationary. They're worried about a wage price spiral, saying, oh well, increased salaries and increased wages for workers means that those businesses have to pass on those costs to the end consumer, meaning that the price of goods and services will go up. So what he's saying right now is, well, we've actually seen incredible population growth, and we've seen, well, there's actually a fair amount of labor supply in the market, right? We've got a relatively loose labor market, is what you would say. We can have people to fill these jobs, right? That's the interesting thing, and it has a big implication for when we could see rate cuts, because, okay, if jobs numbers come down, then that's going to make the Bank of Canada feel a little bit more comfortable with lowering rates. And at risk of being a pause guy, I want to show you this. I saw this on Twitter today. This is very related. This Twitter user says, this was from Thursday, a massive lineup of international students and new immigrants waiting for a job fair at the Toronto Pearson International Airport. They're saying there's no labor shortage like we've been told. We have way too many people in Canada to sustain, and the Liberals want to bring millions more. Don't know about those claims, but let's take a look at this. So this is like obviously trying to make the point that, okay, there's lots of people who are looking for jobs, whether they be the Canadians that have been here for a long time or whether they're new Canadians. They're saying, okay, maybe this story about a labor shortage or like maybe that is less accurate, right? I'm always kind of skeptical of this type of stuff. Skeptical of narratives that would tend to help a big business, right? Like, who stands to benefit from there being a lot of labor in the country? Well, of course, it's big box stores and big major corporations that employ so many people, because that will reduce their cost of labor, right? And help out their share prices. So that's the thing that I tend to think of. But back to what we were checking out here.
When you take a look at recent earnings and the forecast for Walmart, a retail bellwether, or someone like Home Depot, who basically reflects what's happening in home construction or home improvements, what does that tell you about the economy and consumer spending?
Well, the consumer is clearly under pressure here. And we have to remember that when all this cycle is said and done in terms of the mortgage renewal cycle, the average Canadian will see an increase in payments in the order of 34%. When it comes to variable rate payments, it's 54%. So that's very significant. So you are seeing the surveys telling you that people are going to be cutting back on their spending, and they are doing so because when you look at consumption per capita, it's been down in Q2 and Q3 of last year. So, I mean, those companies, what they are seeing is the same thing that we are seeing when we look at the economic data. The consumer is under pressure. People are saving more as well in anticipation of the renewal period, in anticipation of having to increase their payments. And all those factors are really the playbook the Bank of Canada puts in place to see what exactly it's seen this morning, which is inflation in categories that are other than shelter coming down and coming down sufficiently to expect that the 2% target will be reached at the end of the year. And that's been our forecast.
We've been
That's pretty interesting, saying, okay, well, that's exactly what the Bank of Canada is trying to do, is make people feel poor, make people with mortgages feel like, hey, I better not spend on things and sort of bump up my pocketbook here, because when I renew my mortgage, I'm going to be screwed, right? So people saving, spending less as a tool to manipulate the economy and bring down inflation. Interesting stuff. I see Lumo here saying, I'm in Vancouver. Just in the last 2 weeks, there have been over 150 listings of apartments, houses. Is there a massive mortgage crisis about to happen that everyone seems to be ignoring? See, this is the thing that we sort of expected, right? To see, okay, well, if we dramatically raise interest rates, at least compared to where they have been over the past decade since the great financial crisis, well, it's been a drastic interest rate increase. So why haven't there been mass amounts of people not able to pay their mortgages? Why haven't people listed their properties to sell because they can't cover the carrying costs anymore? I think that we've talked about this on the channel. If you've been watching the videos on the channel, that I think that the amortization extensions have had a lot to do with it. The banks don't want to foreclose on people. They don't want to go into power of sale situations. It's a lot of work. It costs them resources to handle that stuff. And even with the previous economic update that happened in October, the federal government said, hey, here's what we're expecting banks to do to make sure that Canadians can stay in their homes, can continue to pay their mortgages. It does always seem like, just from looking at what happened during COVID and what's happening now, that, okay, mortgage holders, well, it seems like policies are kind of built around making sure that they're okay, which kind of has an inverse effect on what actually happens with the housing market and what the Bank of Canada is trying to achieve by raising its rates. Yeah, just from your neighborhood, Lumu, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, and Heo is saying 18-24 month lag time always. That is the case, right? Like you're going to see these rate increases, like the impact that we're having right now is probably from a year ago, the rate increases that happened, rather than maybe the most recent decisions. So that's the risk that the Bank of Canada runs. If you raise rates so quickly and you see, okay, now things are starting to slow down, maybe inflation's coming down a little bit, you don't know how much your recent decisions have had an impact on that, and if it's going to go harder and stronger, right? I guess what I'm saying is that, okay, we don't know if we're even feeling the full impact of the interest rate hikes that have happened to this date because of the lag of how long it takes to trickle into the rest of the economy.
hearing of countries around the globe suggesting that they are in a technical recession, specifically, most recently, Japan and the UK. Where does our economy stand?
Well, that's going to be very interesting to watch on February 29th, because we are going to see the Canadian numbers for the fourth quarter. So far, we have preliminary data suggesting that the Canadian economy might have rebounded in the fourth quarter. It might have been assisted by the strength of the U.S. economy, because we've seen apparently a strong contribution from net exports. Having said that, we have to be very careful with the preliminary data, because there is a history of significant revisions to the StatScan data. And sometimes the data that ultimately is published departs from the preliminary indication. So we are being careful. What we've seen in Japan and in the UK, it's not that the probability of that happening here is zero. But even that being said, we know that the circumstances here are one where we have a near record population expansion. So that will, even if mechanically, produce a stronger GDP. But when you look at things on a per capita basis, the Canadian economy is, for all intents and purposes, is in recession.
That's exactly what we've been talking about on the channel for like a year plus, right? Is saying, okay, even though our economic numbers look good relative to other nations, you got to consider, okay, what human stimulus, what human QE have we poured on the situation to pump up our GDP numbers and our economic data, right? Saying like, okay, if we add 1 million people to the economy, of course there's going to be more spending, of course there's going to be more creation of goods and services from those people being here, and more consumption of those goods and services from the growth of population. So can we call that like actual GDP growth, or is it just kind of like an artificial GDP growth that we can only sustain if we continue to add people into the economy? And this is what he's saying right now: is that, hey, Canada, essentially, we're in a recession right now. If it were not for this this human stimulus that we've added in, so that's interesting. So what he's saying here is, okay, rate cuts, he believes are going to come in April. He says the jobs data is what is making him think that. We've got a looser labor market. I showed you that that Twitter clip earlier. Obviously, that's just anecdotal, but we've also got inflation coming down. We're now back within the 1% to 3% band as of this most recent inflation data. All of that points to, okay, maybe the path is a little bit more clear for the Bank of Canada to cut rates. The only thing that I think stands in their way right now is the shelter price inflation that we're still seeing, specifically rental price, right? We're seeing in many markets, obviously, real estate is really specific to individual areas across the country, but we're seeing rent prices go up. That's the general trend, right? And the Bank of Canada is worried about that. I'm saying, okay, that could stick around in the inflation. It could cause inflation to remain high for a while. The other part of the shelter costs in there is mortgage interest costs. Obviously, with higher interest rates than the previous year's comparison, well, you're gonna see higher mortgage interest costs, right? People paying more in interest on their mortgages. That's factored into CPI as well. If those things stay high, well, it could be tricky for the Bank of Canada to cut rates, as well as their concern about, well, like, if we cut rates, are we just going to have another real estate boom, a blow off top with a bunch of pent up demand that maybe people haven't been able to purchase for the past year, 2 years as rates have been high. But now all of a sudden you bring down rates a little bit, people can afford more mortgage, stretch themselves further financially, but be able to afford more homes. So I think that's kind of what they're weighing here. Got some other, oh yeah, this is what I just showed you. And what do we have here? Okay, I thought that this was going to be interesting. I didn't fully pre-watch this one, so let's take a look at this and more thoughts about the housing market in relation to these interest rates and what impact that could have on the Bank of Canada's next decision.
Well, because of rising rates, understandably, home buyers did not want variable rate mortgages. But with the Bank of Canada widely expected to pivot this year, Canadians taking on those variable rate mortgages have been on the rise. It's coming a little bit earlier than our next economist was expecting. We've got Farah Amran, who's senior economist at Scotiabank. We just can't seem to wean off our addiction of housing, and even the prospect of rate cuts is enough to lure buyers and rate shoppers, I guess, back into the market.
Yes, absolutely. Home sales picked up in December. It was a surprising jump for everybody, I think, and that continued into January. And the bank hasn't even started cutting rates or signaled that it's about to. And really, even fixed rates, when we look at them between November and December, they ticked down, but really barely enough to have an impact on affordability or an ability to qualify. So this increase in sales activity did happen sooner than we expected, for sure.
What does this mean for the Bank of Canada? Because as of the most recent speeches, it seemed like the bank was trying to not wash its hands of what's going on in housing, but basically saying, you know, there's limits in how much they can control of it.
Well, it's true because the Bank of Canada's main objective is the inflation target. The Bank of Canada targets 2% inflation, and that's what it focuses on. Inflation is not at 2%, it's above 2%. So the Bank of Canada will continue targeting the policy rate towards bringing inflation back to target. rather than trying to control the housing market via that tool. It's an instrument that is a blunt instrument intended to merely target the inflation.
Ultimately, do you think it complicates the Bank of Canada's desire or ability to cut rates?
It could very well do that, yes. I mean, you know, house prices have not started increasing with the increase in sales that we've seen. But that is typical. Typically, prices lag the increase in sales or the decline in sales. So it could be that prices start increasing.
That's pretty interesting. Like saying, okay, maybe we've seen more activity, which we have seen this quarter, and maybe prices tick up in the future. But of course, nobody knows, right? This is the thing. We could have another leg of inflation in 6 months, and then the Bank of Canada has to go even harder on the rate increases, similar to the 70s, right, where they kind of lost a little bit of credibility for fighting inflation because they cut rates too soon. Inflation came back, and they had to really pound the economy with higher rates. And along those same lines, Candace, here you're saying, this is Mountain Finance, the government posted a budgetary deficit of $23.6 billion for the first 9 months of its 2023-24 fiscal year. Last year, this was only a $5.5 billion deficit to 2022-23. Maybe we need to check that out a little bit later in the stream, Candace, Mountain Finance. That's interesting. Like a way higher. I wonder how much the federal debt servicing costs play into that, because I know they had a lot of bonds that rolled over that they owed money on, and now they obviously you have to refinance that debt at the higher rates. So I'll have to check that out
in a couple of months, and that would put upward pressure on inflation. But the other part of how housing impacts the Bank of Canada's mission is that it increases economic activity. It has, once sales increase, there are spillover effects on other sectors in the economy that are related to housing, like furniture and renovation. And therefore, when home sales pick up, economic activity also picks up. And we are in an environment where the Bank of Canada is actively trying to slow down economic activity to create an excess supply and bring inflation back to target.
That's like the story of Canada's economy. It's like so much bundled up in real estate. All of the services that people will get on their get to service their homes, all the different goods that people purchase for their homes, and like the feeling of wealth that Canadians have tied up in real estate, right? I think that like because of how much debt the average Canadian has in order to afford real estate, the Bank of Canada has more control over our population through the manipulation of interest rates. We look at the States, right? Totally different story there, because your term is your amortization. Your amortization is your term. Just to make this super clear, I think a lot of people, this might be redundant for me to say, but a mortgage is made up of two different numbers, right? The amortization is how long the loan is stretched out over to make the payments. So if you were to make payments monthly for this amount of years, you would pay off the entirety of the debt. In the States, that's how long the mortgage is. Like you have in most cases, you have a mortgage with a bank or with some sort of lender, and they're locked in just like you are for that total period of time to pay that mortgage. In Canada, not the case. We get to renegotiate the terms of your mortgage every 5 years, every 3 years. This second number, the 5 years, 3 years, is called the term, right? So I think the Bank of Canada has a lot more control over the economy here than the U.S. does, because of how it impacts people who are holding debt on real estate. Could be a potential reason why one element of the reason why the U.S. economy is thriving right now relatively to Canada, right? Because maybe what the Federal Reserve is doing in the States is a little bit less impactful on the day-to-day lives of average Canadians. Maybe it has bigger implications for the businesses down there, sort of big economic actors, but on a individual level, I think that there probably is a lot less leverage that the central bank has on the people. So interesting stuff. Just checking the chat here, see if there's more on rate cuts. But I think that the summary is, well, we're starting to see the numbers saying, well, we could bring down rates in the next 4-5 months. But again, people said that back in November, right? People were expecting, okay, April 1st, boom, we're going to see a rate cut. It could still happen, or on whenever they would have the meeting to announce it, but it could still happen. All right, there's more to talk about. There is more to talk about. A lot going on today and this weekend. We saw Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland and maybe another couple ministers go to Ukraine to well, we didn't know what they were going to say, and it turns out that there has been an additional pledge of support of $3 billion to help Ukraine in this war with Russia. So we're going to take a look at this statement, and there's takes on both sides of this, right? Saying, okay, we have promised way more support. Well, how come it didn't come in the past, and why are we only doing it now? On the other side of things, people saying, okay, well, this doesn't feel good to see a government funding a war or funding a war that we're not directly involved in, and maybe not funding other things locally in our own country. So I want to take a quick look at this, more to get into. Of course, we have a bunch of different stories here. We've got pharmacare and the potential of Trudeau's term sort of being extended based on some new happenings with Trudeau and Singh, that sort of partnership that they have, as well as a little bit of a rumor that there could be a resignation looming. I'm not entirely sure. Hey, great to see a lot of people in the chat. We've got Jonathan, Eric, Henry, Ruth, Graham, Mr. Sunshine Baby. Good to see you. Always interesting content on your channel. It's cool to see you here. Eric, Murphy, Graham, Charles, just dildo. Oh, nice. I walked right into that one, didn't I? Oh man, somebody clip it. All right. Let's dive into this, because I think this is the bulk of the announcement, and then we'll get into some takes.
Stand Putin's army, but as Ukraine has proven over and over again, Putin made a grave miscalculation, and Ukraine still stands. Zcherny vmerla Ukraina. Volodymyr, you are leading the battle against autocracy and the battle to preserve the peace and security.
I'm going to take a little bit of a liberty here. I don't think that we want to spend 7 minutes straight listening to all of this. So let's do what I do a lot when I'm watching these videos. We're going to bump up the speed a little bit to 1.75. So if he sounds like a chipmunk to you, blame me. But we're going to get through this a little more briefly.
Security that our world is built on. Ici, en Ukraine, les illusions impériales de Poutine ont fait face à une défense bien plus courte pour leurs droits. On ne peut pas oublier votre contrôle libre depuis. So today, Canada and Ukraine have completed negotiations and have signed a historic new bilateral security cooperation agreement. As part of our agreement, we're committing over $3 billion of critical military and financial support to Ukraine in 2024. The new military support builds on what we've provided since 2022 and continue to provide, and it includes significant support for the Armoured Coalition, which is an area of Canadian strength and will allow us to continue to demonstrate leadership amongst our coalition partners, and support to the Air Force Coalition, building on our commitment in July. There will also be ongoing support over several years because we are here for the long term to help Ukraine win a decisive victory against Putin's unprovoked illegal invasion. War isn't just experienced on the battlefield. It's lived every day by everyday people. And the government of Ukraine needs to be able to be there for them no matter what, to make sure there is a Ukraine to rebuild once war ends. That's why there is a need for critical financial support, support that will sustain Ukraine's economy and long-term financial stability. This is a significant part of what we're announcing today. This money allows roads to be repaired after a bombing. It pays nurses and doctors who keep people healthy, and it supports Ukrainians as they fight back against Russia. Aujourd'hui, on annonce une contribution de 3,02 milliards pour apporter une aide financière et militaire essentielle de sécurité. Les citoyens strong. Putin pretends to be powerful, but truly strong leaders don't assassinate their opponents. Truly strong leaders don't use police and military to oppress people's voices.
That's an interesting statement, given some of people's criticism of Trudeau, but we'll go on.
Ukrainians already won their freedom. They freed themselves from the shackles of Soviet oppression in 1991. They fought back against Putin's attempt to control their country in the Maidan Revolution a decade ago. And for the past 2 years, they have given their everything to protect and defend their rights, their land, their democracy. C'est pourquoi on est tous ici aujourd'hui, aux côtés de la Première ministre qui préside actuellement l'Union européenne, déterminés tous envers with Ukraine. Ukraine has many more friends than the Kremlin. We remain clear-eyed about right and wrong and the urgency of this fight. What is happening here, the lives that are on the line, the very principles that are the basis of our freedoms, matters, not just now, not just here, but to future people, for the future people are striving for in every corner of the world. And all of us must remember that it is because of the sacrifices of every Ukrainian, every soldier on the battlefield, every journalist telling the truth of Russian war crimes, every civilian persevering in protecting their language and their way of life, that we are here today on defiantly Ukrainian soil. You have sacrificed so much for freedoms and for the values of democracy, and we will be with you with whatever it takes for as long as it takes, because we share your determination that you must, and you can, and you will prevail. Do перемоги. Slava Ukraini.
Заява прем'єр-міністра Королівства Бельгія.
Dear Mr. President, everyone.
Okay. So that's interesting, right? We got $3 billion going to Ukraine with this new sort of support deal that the Prime Minister is announcing here today. Honestly, I have no idea what to think about all of this. Obviously, you have the basic takes of, okay, $3 billion, how could that be used on Canadian soil, and how could that help people, and people wondering, okay, what is this actually doing? I guess my base take on all of this is that I'm just super skeptical of global organizations and maybe, how do I put this? Trying to stick everyone in the same narrative on what is right and what is supposed to be happening, and that's the sort of feeling I get from the response. Like you can't question anything. You can't have any concerns outside. I'm not articulating this very well, but I'm basically skeptical of global organizations and concerned. Okay, to what extent should we be thinking about sort of on a global scale how we can sort of help the world, or can a small country like Canada maybe try to focus on getting its internal affairs going? Yeah, like this is the take that many people have, Jonathan. How many more Canadians going homeless with this waste of money? Canada will never see anything from Ukraine. Yeah, at the same time, though, like perhaps this money is going and is making a difference. Like obviously, I'm not on the side of Russia or on the side of Ukraine specifically. I don't know enough about the situations to make any kind of judgment apart from just the headlines that I read and that most people get fed, right? We just saw the death of Alexei Navalny. That seems a little sketch to me. The only deterrent or the only opposition to Putin in Russia gets killed. That seems a little sketchy. I mean, like along with him getting poisoned with nerve gas and sort of taken down. Like, I don't know how many people can be on the side of that, right? Obviously, there's some issues there with someone seeking power by getting rid of political opponents, but that doesn't mean that I can't question. Okay, to what extent should Canada be involved in all of this? Like, we're involved in this way. Sort of showing, hey, we're a big part of NATO, look at us, but then we also don't spend for our military up to the targets of NATO, and that these other countries are expecting us to contribute to this alliance. So it just seems like a lot of picking and choosing, and I don't really understand how those choices are made. But at the same time, right, like we have the leader of the opposition, the person that many people think is going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada, saying, I vow to always stand with Ukraine as the third year of this Russian war begins. Let's see if he says anything further, denouncing the tyranny of Putin. It seems like there's a lot of pushing of pro-Russian narratives in a lot of right-wing circles. Like it's like, okay, sure, like talk about both sides. Like maybe NATO has provoked Russia to some extent, right? Like if you're not part of an alliance and a multinational alliance keeps expanding, getting closer and closer to your border, obviously as a country you're going to be hyper threatened. But I don't know if that gives you the right to go into an independent country and do what you will. Yeah, so saying, to finish my point, it seems like there's a lot of overly pushing of like pro-Russian narrative on right-wing focused stuff. But a lot of it seems messed up that it's going on with all of the Navalny stuff happening at the same time. Yeah, so it seems like that no matter which political party you support here in Canada, and I only talk mostly about the two in most contexts, although maybe we'll have a different opposition party after the next election. We'll talk about that in a minute and how there could be incentive for the NDP to actually fast track an election. But regardless of which political party you want to pull for, it seems like, okay, we're thinking the same on this issue, right? Maybe we're thinking the same in the NATO alliance. We're thinking the same, which is why some people sort of think, okay, we've got a mono party in Canada. The pendulum swings from liberal to conservative, back to liberal, back to conservative over the decades, but ultimately whose interests are being served at the end of the day? Is it actual Canadians, the population, the people that are here who I think that politicians should be serving? Or is there some more multinational narratives, multinational power structures that we don't fully understand that are being adhered to more? So that's what I question. I don't know if that's true, but it's just a sense I get. And here's the side of it that I don't think that I agree with this. This is the Pleb Reporter. Another YouTube, check out the channel. Like we talk about all different opinions on this channel. Because honestly, I feel like I'm not the smartest and I need to look at all these things to figure out, okay, what do I actually think about this stuff? He says, you cannot claim to care about suffering Canadians and support Ukraine funding. You can't do both. Pick a side. Sending money to Ukraine while Canadians are using food banks and living in tent cities is a slap in the face. I'm Canada first. Which are you? Pierre saying, okay, like calling out Pierre Poilievre for saying that you're in favor of supporting Ukraine. Like, I don't think these things are mutually exclusive. Yeah, hello, goodbye says they're serving the big corporations. I think that's kind of the answer that I get to as well. But I don't think that you can't do both. That seems like a bad take to me. Or one that doesn't make sense. Does that mean that you can't fund anything? You can't fund anything but the one issue that you're focused on? Like, okay, we can't focus on any national issues if at the same time we don't have all of our ducks in a row at home. I don't know if I buy that entirely, but I agree with the sentiment here that, okay, there's more that can be done on our own soil. And maybe $3 billion is the right amount. Maybe it's too much. Maybe it's too little. But I don't think that you can't support national things or international things when there's something going wrong in your own country. But just maybe the more focus should be there. So I thought that was wild. We're going to have to see how that all rolls out. Yeah. Interesting stuff. I'm just checking out the chat here. If you're joining us and you haven't hopped into the chat, hop in there. Let me know what you're doing. And let me know where you're tuning in from. It's good to see you. Oh, thank you very much, Mountain Finance, Candace. Thank you for a great live. I don't want to leave, but supper is calling. Have a good supper, Candace. Hope you enjoy it. Nice. Yeah. Kapler, I'm for Canadians first. And I agree with that. I'm for Canadians first, but I don't think that means only. Canadians first, but not Canadians only is what I think. Yeah, that's what I think right now. Who knows? My opinions can change over time, just like anyone. Like I get frustrated when I see content creators that are like, "This is true. I'm telling you what is actually happening in this situation. Look at this. This is what you should think about it." I have no clue, just like the rest of you. But I try to figure it out, and we try to figure it out together. One thing that I want to figure out today, and this is a segue into our next topic, is it seems that Trudeau's reign in Canada has been extended. It's been sort of teetering for quite a long time because they're a minority government. A minority in government in Canada means that you can have an election at the drop of a hat if there's a vote of no confidence that happens in the House of Commons, meaning the opposition party and the other MPs vote against your government on a vote of confidence, saying we don't support this government anymore. It's not functioning. We need an election. That's essentially what it would be saying. But that hasn't happened because of a special deal between the NDP and the Liberals. This is a supply and confidence agreement, and over the past maybe month or 2 months, Jagmeet Singh has been threatening Justin Trudeau saying, hey, we're going to call an election if you don't give us what you want. And there's the little bit of an intro. Let's listen to this.
Back to Canada and specifically Ottawa, the Liberals and the NDP have reached a deal on pharmacare legislation ahead of a March 1st deadline. The plan for a universal single-payer system is part of the confidence and supply agreement between the Liberals and the NDP and includes coverage for birth control and diabetes medication. We sat down earlier with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, who calls the legislation historic.
We said very clearly that we wanted to make sure people could get some hope when it comes to the cost of medication. 1 in 4 Canadian can't afford to take the medication they need. They skip their pills, or they stretch out their medication, or they just don't fill the prescription at all. So knowing that, we wanted to make sure we could cover medication. So we're really proud to say not only have we locked in the legislation to move forward on universal pharmacare, but we also have a commitment to cover 2 classes of drugs, contraceptives and diabetes medication. And so what that means is there's a kid that I met on Parliament Hill with his parents, and he said he's got type 1 diabetes, born with it. He's not worried about the injections, the pills, but he is worried about how much it was costing his parents. And I promised that kid I was going to fight for him. And now I can tell that kid that we've now got a commitment to cover his medication.
So, and what is the roadmap to making that all happen going forward? Like, what can you tell us at this point?
Certainly. So we'll have legislation that'll be tabled by March 1st. And then the commitments on covering those 2 classes of drugs, it'll be similar to the child care agreement that the government was able to sign with provinces. So we'll push for that to happen as soon as possible. But like BC has done already, where you go into a pharmacy with your prescription, and your prescription birth control, contraceptives, IUD is all covered. Similarly, we'll have that happen across the country. It's going to require negotiating with provinces, but we're confident we can make this happen now.
Now, on the
That's interesting. So we have this deal made. Before I get too far into it, Chad, appreciate the support with the super chat. I heard the NDP would not let that call happen to keep Jagmeet Singh's pension. I'm not sure. I've heard that theory a lot. I don't know what the dates are on pensions, how long you have to be a leader of a party, or if there's any kind of timelines on that. If there's any sort of truth to that sort of claim. Interesting stuff, though, Chad. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. But they're saying here, okay, Liberals, NDP, we've reached an agreement. The handshake deal is still on. We wanted full pharmacare. We wanted this all to come at once, but the Liberals said no. Okay, we had to go back and forth a little bit, but we did get diabetes medication as well as contraception. I think that this is a very, very strategic compromise coming from the Liberals. We're going to get to that in a second, because I think that this is, well, yes, I think it's a good thing. Is it odd to say that? I don't think so. Yeah, I think it's a good thing to have more Canadians have things paid for when it comes to healthcare. I don't think that's totally off base. I think this is a good thing. People should be supported as long as we can keep the financial side attached to this. But I think that this is more political than you might think, and we're going to get into that in a second.
economic front, people have had a lot of questions about the state of the economy, things like inflation, et cetera. How do you think about it from that context in terms of what this affords people?
I look at this as an investment that's going to bring down inflation. We look at the cost of medication. That's something that's very costly, continues to rise. Canada pays. We're the third most expensive jurisdiction for drug costs in the world, only behind United States and Switzerland. So it's quite costly. So this is going to help save some money. It's going to save money for women and for people that need access to contraceptives. It's going to save money for people that have to take life-saving insulin and other medication to deal with diabetes. It's going to save them money. It's an investment that's going to bring down the cost of medication as well.
And then just on the fiscal side for the country, longer term, we're constantly having questions around how we spend and how we deal with things like deficits over the long term. So how does that fit into the equation?
Well, there are certain areas where we need to stop spending. I think that there's been some serious concerns around the contracting out of services, hundreds of millions of dollars that have been spent, that our civil service should be able to perform those services and wants to be able to do and should be able to do. That's where we could save. There's billions of dollars that are going to subsidies that we don't need to spend on profitable companies like oil and gas companies. So we could cut back on those type of investments or those type of expenditures that are not good that are wasteful, and then instead make investments like in pharmacare, which would help bring down the cost for medication.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Like, I know that a lot of people are sort of down on the NDP and down on Jagmeet Singh, and we're going to get to that because I think that this is a lot more political than you might even imagine. But I don't think it's unfair to say, okay, there's spending in other areas that is worth less to average Canadians than spending on pharmacare would be, right? Would make people's everyday lives a little cheaper because we can cover more of that stuff. The subsidy, like the billions of dollars to electric vehicle companies to open up these plants, saying, okay, yes, we are going to use all local workers, and then they bring in workers from Korea to help set up the plant. There's frustrating things like that feel like it's like benefiting corporations more than the average Canadian. So I agree, there could be spending cut in other places. But yeah, I think this is a lot more political.
Childcare.
It seems like the full pharmacare package that the NDP say that they are working to get from the Liberals could be an election promise that's kind of dangled out in front of us, saying like this draft legislation that they're going to be starting now, well, we could do that if you vote us in. Pierre Poilievre and his Conservatives, they'll never do that. I also think that given the fact that this covers contraception, I think the Liberals could be using this as a political wedge to see how the Conservatives respond, right? Like typically contraceptive and that sort of thing has been a sort of a social issue that some people have sort of grabbed onto. So it could be just sort of setting a trap, like here's a potential stumbling block for certain Conservatives, right? Maybe a lot of people who have left the Liberals and have joined the Conservatives, at least in their thinking for this next election. Maybe if the Conservatives say something that's a little bit more anti-contraception or thinks that shouldn't be something that's covered, maybe some of the more moderate Conservatives socially would be like, oh, I don't actually support this Conservative government as much as they thought. So it could be a good wedge. I mean, ultimately, I think it's a good compromise between the Liberals and the NDP, like thinking from their perspectives, because the Liberals are wanting to distance themselves from the perception that they spend recklessly. So they're saying, hey, we're not immediately spending everything on doing a full pharmacare. We're going to help on these two items. But at the same time, I think the Liberals are going to try to take a lot of credit for this. They're going to say, this was me, that we did this, the Liberals, we were in power, look at what we got you, pharmacare, for these things, even though Singh is hoping that, hey, we can take credit for that because they wouldn't have done it otherwise. But I also ultimately don't think the NDP is going to get a lot of credit for this. There were some polling numbers that I thought were pretty interesting, though, showing that, okay, certain polls have the NDP right around the Liberals in terms of how many seats they would get if there was an election. I thought that this would mean, okay, Singh is more incentivized to go to an election now because, hey, they might be the opposition party. He might be the opposition leader, which is a huge promotion or step up, at least in terms of the perception of the job, maybe not in pay. It's a huge step up if you are the opposition party. But it seems like because the Liberals aren't polling well and because the NDP aren't polling well or fundraising well in comparison to the Conservatives, that maybe both of them still don't want an election, even if it would mean the NDP leapfrogging the Liberals in terms of support. So, yeah. I thought that was interesting. And some takes on Singh in this whole deal I found on TikTok. This is Steve Boots, has a YouTube channel as well. Generally pretty left-leaning in their takes. I want to listen to this.
Canadian NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, pictured here explaining how best to select a cantaloupe from the grocery store. You tap it, and then if it makes a hollow sound, it's good. I think. I don't know. I'm making that up. Anyways, he's painted himself into a bit of a corner. You see, a lot of Singh's policy positions rely on a fundamental misunderstanding of jurisdiction. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Jagmeet Singh is a provincial politician. He is focused on provincial issues. He cares about healthcare. He cares about education, which are provincial issues. I really think he'd be more successful at a provincial level, but I digress. You see, he spoke up yesterday talking about how we should have national contraception coverage included in the pharmacare bill. You know, the bill that he's threatening to bring down the government if it doesn't get brought forward.
So this came out like a little bit before the announcement that just happened, I think, yesterday. So when he was threatening it, Boots is saying that, hey, well, I'll let him say what he's saying.
Now, here's the thing. Birth control included in those pharmacare bills is a great idea. It should be there. IUDs, hormonal birth control, all of it. Yes, excellent, include them. But the federal government can't do that. Healthcare is provincial. Prescription drug care is provincial. So the only way that this deal can get done is with individual agreements with every province. And that would mean getting every individual premier to agree to a federal healthcare funding program between now and the start of March, which is the deadline that the NDP have set. So if the agreement isn't brought forward and completed in March, Singh has said that he's going to bring down the government. But the government can't complete the pharmacare bill because they need to make the deals with the individual provinces. So, the NDP are not prepared for an election, and I'm not quite sure why they would call an election to come in third place. This is the issue. This is terrible political strategy. You are threatening to bring down the government based on a national pharmacare plan that you don't even have your own version of yet, and that cannot be completed without provincial cooperation. The federal government's been trying to negotiate healthcare deals with the provinces, and Saskatchewan and Quebec still haven't signed on. And that's been over a year. This is just terrible political strategy. Do you support the government or do you not support the government? But either way, you kind of need to understand how this works. The government can't just unilaterally roll out pharmacare plans. They need provincial cooperation. What are they doing to get it?
I think I think he's right to a certain extent. Saying, okay, well, this is provincial jurisdiction. Why are you so concerned about this, right? But we've seen that the reality of what jurisdiction certain federal government or provincial government, no matter the jurisdiction, people care about issues, right? We saw that with the housing comments from Trudeau, where he said, well, actually, housing is a provincial issue, and all of the shitstorm that stirred up, right? With people being so pissed about hearing that. So in terms of perception, you got to be talking about these provincial issues if you're a federal party, or maybe you got to think about talking about them, even if it means that you don't have a lot of control over it. We saw childcare get a bunch of signatures across all the different provinces, even though that's provincial jurisdiction. The feds came up with a plan and they rallied everyone to do it, and they've gotten most provinces that he was talking about. So I think it could be done here, but it's going to be a lengthy process, may not work. And it's more stuff that I think that the Liberals can hold over people's heads come election time, right? Hey, we've made so much progress here. We just need one final step and we're not going to get to take it if you don't vote us in again. That's what I think. And thanks again, Chad, for the super chat. It says, I'm all for contraception as in preventing contraception. Oh, as in preventing conception, not the general cover birth control that also terminates already conceived fetuses. Interesting. So you're saying, okay, more education, don't have sex unless you're ready for a baby. That kind of stuff, all for I guess maybe that's not contraception. Interesting take, Chad. I appreciate the support. Huh. Okay, so yeah, that's what Boots is saying. Okay, even someone who's relatively left-leaning saying, hey, Singh, you're not really taking a stand here. You're going to be sort of associated with this Liberal government even if they go down. Especially if it's not of your doing, you're going to be associated with them. So maybe pick your battles. But okay, so there's the one interesting thing here, which is a lot of people will say, okay, Trudeau's doing the work. He's involved on all of these files. He just got his term extended. He's going to be here for a while. I think that that's true. I think that he's probably going to be here right until the end, and he's going to go in as leader to the next election. But there is a theory that's going on right now, and let me know if you've heard this, or if it makes sense to you. But his father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, resigned from his role as leader on February 29th. It was a leap year, and some of the people, maybe the astrologists and the people who really read into the signs are saying, okay, watch out for February 29th. Like father, like son. Maybe we see Trudeau step down, especially with all the extremely poor polling as of late. A lot of even Liberals are saying now, hey, if we're going to win this, we need a different leader in power. So I don't know. Henry says, God, what a stupid theory. Trudeau is no Trudeau. It says Graham Charles. Yeah, that's what I think too. I think I don't see this guy stepping down. Like Pierre Elliott, he was older, more at the end of his career when he stepped down. And like Trudeau, like what's he like? I guess it's the name, and you can do all kinds of consulting things after you're a leader of a country. But like, what's he gonna do if he steps down? I feel like there's a lot of identity wrapped up in the character he's been playing for 8 years of the prime minister, the good looking socially liberal savior of Canada sort of character that was crafted in 2016. I feel like that's a lot of the identity that's even carried to now. I don't see him stepping down, but who knows? February 29th, I'm gonna be looking for it. More interesting stuff coming out here about the Emergencies Act laws. Now we thought, okay, this whole thing was done. Like I don't talk about this stuff very frequently. The main thing that I had an issue with was the use of the Emergencies Act. We're talking about the Freedom Convoy, the trucker convoy, the trucker protests that happened maybe a year and a half ago, or how long ago was that? Who even knows at this point? The main issue I had was the evocation of the Emergencies Act and the shutting down of people's bank accounts because they were associated with the convoy. I was very frustrated by that. Because you look at it outside of the context of this situation, of this unique scenario. I think that if you set the precedent of a government being able to invoke the Emergencies Act, saying, okay, now we're going to target these individuals and their bank accounts, which is your money is ultimately your freedom. You can't move around the country. You can't make your voice heard if you don't have access to your funds. We're just going to step in here and we're going to cut people off from that without having to go to court, without sort of seeking permission to do so. I think that that's an awful precedent to set. And like maybe you agree with, hey, well, we can't have people in the roads like this, it's obstructing other people. All that's fair. Even if you're anti-freedom convoy, I think all of that's fair. But I don't understand how anyone can be okay with the evocation of the Emergencies Act, because if a government gets into power in the future that you don't agree with, even if you agree with the one now, then it opens the door up for them to do the very same thing. Say, what if you're protesting something that's important to you and your entire thing gets shut down and people that believe what you believe get their bank accounts sort of frozen and you cut off from society, essentially. I think that would be an awful thing to set a precedent about.
The convoy protests had been in Ottawa for 3 weeks. Border crossings in 4 provinces were being disrupted. That's when the federal cabinet invoked the Emergencies Act for the first time. In doing so, it gave law enforcement agencies extraordinary powers to end the protests. But in the first court ruling of its kind, Justice Richard Mosley sided with civil liberties groups who argued the government failed to meet a key test before invoking the act.
Justice Mosley, in his decision today, finds that objectively the legal thresholds for invoking the Emergencies Act were not met.
The ruling comes with no financial awards or penalties. The plaintiffs simply sought a declaration that they were right and the government was wrong. The government, on the other hand, still thinks it's right, and it will appeal the decision.
We were convinced at the time, I was convinced at the time, it was the right thing to do. It was the necessary thing to do.
Another judge, Justice Paul Rouleau, agreed with the government, but Rouleau made his conclusion not in a court of law, but as a result of the Public Order Emergency Commission inquiry of late 2022. Rouleau believed there was a perceived threat to national security, and the federal cabinet is expected to reinforce that point in its appeal of Mosley's ruling.
Our national security, which includes our national economic security, was under threat.
Regardless of the appeal's success.
So that's what's happening, is that there's an appeal saying, okay, they didn't actually have the right to do that. This story goes a little bit further, saying, okay, Chris Barber, one of the people who was involved in the Freedom Convoy, is now suing on the other end of things. The organizer's suing. He says he owns a trucking company in southwestern Saskatchewan. And this disruption to his bank account cost them the ability to conduct basic financial transactions and live normal lives, leading to severe inconvenience, hardship, embarrassment, exclusion from modern society, and damaged personal and business relationships. Yeah, we'll keep going here. I appreciate the super chat, Chad, saying they really tip their hat with the bank account freeze, even for donations from people not on site of the protests. Yeah, I think so. I think the manipulation of people's funding is a place that I draw the line on what's acceptable, regardless of what those people are supporting or how you feel about that. There's interesting stuff down here. Yeah, it's saying Barbara couldn't access money for daily living expenses like food, fuel, and medicine. Also suffered and experienced fear and anxiety to the anticipated loss of income, missed payments, defaults on loan, credit card bills. It just shows how much of an effect like inserting yourself into the financial day-to-day of citizens can have on the individual citizens, right? This is why a lot of people are concerned about central bank digital currencies and, okay, does that bring a lot of extra control that could be exerted on a population if you if there's no longer or if you have more control over the ones and zeros of their banking software, their digital dollars, right? That's one of the reasons that I hold a little bit of crypto, blue chip stuff, Bitcoin, Ethereum, because I ultimately, who knows where this sort of centralized financial system ends up, right? There could be a government that takes a lot more control over that, and how do I actually want that to all play out? Ultimately, they control all of the on-ramps and off-ramps for crypto at the end of the day anyways, but yeah, it's something that I worry about at the very least, and something I wanted to talk about it with you. Henry says, Freeland is genuinely a very weird person. Yeah, interesting stuff here. And here's some takes on the pro side, I think, a little more pro on what actually happened with the Emergencies Act and how it could have been warranted, or how that actually happened. And it seems that a lot of people are blaming not the protesters themselves, but the provincial government for their lack of action. If this is going to play for me. Hello, McFly. Let's refresh it.
A federal judge has found that using the Emergencies Act for the Freedom Convoy was a violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So what exactly does this mean? It should be noted that the justice involved is highly respected, and the case was not brought forward by Freedom Convoyers, but instead by the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. It should also be noted that this is a lower court ruling, meaning that it can be appealed and overturned. So let's talk about why that might or might not happen. The ruling is extremely long, and not everybody has had a chance to go through it, but one of the things that was noted is that the Alberta Coots blockade was taken care of and cleared prior to invoking the Emergencies Act. This was essentially used as evidence pointing towards the fact that the federal government could have solved the Ottawa problem and the Windsor problem without the usage of the Emergencies Act. But the difference between Alberta and Ontario is that in Alberta, the police and the government there actually did their job. And in the judge's conclusion, they even say that they would have invoked the act if it was up to them. So the judge is basically saying, even though this is a violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, they would have done the same thing. And one of the reasons for this is because, once again, the province of Ontario did nothing to stop this. The city of Ottawa did nothing to prevent this. The police in Ottawa did nothing to stop it. And then Doug Ford basically went into hiding for a few weeks, which is ironic because Doug Ford was one of the only premiers who was an enthusiastic supporter of Trudeau invoking emergency powers, because this was Ford's responsibility and he did not want to act. He did not want to be a leader in that moment, which is why many people around Trudeau, including non-partisan, non-political actors, told Trudeau to invoke the Emergencies Act. It got so far that there were actually active talks with the Canadian Armed Forces about this. Trudeau did not make this decision lightly or willy-nilly. He made this decision because he had to. That does not mean that it is not a violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Will this be overturned on appeal or by a higher court? I think so. But I think the ruling is going to be very specific. Eventually we will see that technically, in theory, using the Emergencies Act for this was a violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but only because the province of Ontario and the city of Ottawa refused to act. When the local police and the provincial politicians refuse to do their jobs, the feds have to step in. But the feds didn't have the powers needed to do so without invoking the Emergencies Act. Long story short, if Doug Ford did his job, the Emergencies Act would have never been invoked in the first place, and I've been saying that for years.
I mean, so trying to make the argument that, okay, it wasn't like a malicious thing where where the government was like, hey, we're going to step in here, even though we're not needed, we're going to trigger the Emergencies Act, we're going to invoke it, and we're going to take care of this situation. He's saying, well, none of that would have been necessary if the Conservative Premier of Ontario actually used the maximum powers that he had to take to solve the situation. Like I think that he said they did in Alberta or in Manitoba, the other sort of border crossing that was blockaded. I think that's a take that I haven't heard a lot of, right? Like a lot of people say, oh, okay, Trudeau intentionally invoked it to go down the slippery slope where he's got a lot more control over the country and has the ability to do this. And this was one of the main things that upset all the people internationally, is that this Emergencies Act was invoked. But this, yeah, I'm saying, okay, maybe he was kind of forced into it by the inaction of a Conservative government in the province. I could see that side of things. I don't think it excuses using the Emergency Act, though. I don't think it excuses going into people's bank accounts to solve this issue. Like, did you really need to freeze the funding? Did you really need to freeze the funding of the convoy to get rid of them? I don't think so. And I think that was what was a step too far. But I do think that there's blame on the Premier in that situation. I thought that was super interesting. Okay, now a few more stories that I think you're going to find interesting as we get through this stream. And thank you again for everyone tuning in who's been interested in all this stuff and checking out the channel. We've got a bunch of people in the chat: Steam Gamer, Daniel Parent, Derek Smith, Chad, PXN America, Colin Duffy, Don West, Jonathan Boisvert, Peter Krantz, Colin Duffy again, Gooba Gaming. I like it. Good to see you all here hanging out on the stream. Take a look at this ad for The Guardian. This is this blew my mind. I didn't know that this was even going on. Canadian University vending machine error reveals the use of facial recognition. University of Waterloo dispenser displays facial recognition message despite no prior indication it was monitoring students. So apparently there's like cameras in some vending machines. Like, I wonder if this is more widespread than just like one at a university. Malfunctioning vending machine at a Canadian university has inadvertently revealed that a number of them have been using facial recognition technology in secret. Earlier this month, a Snap dispenser at University of Waterloo showed an error message saying vending facial recognition.app.exe. We wouldn't have known if it weren't for the application error. And the company that makes the vending machines has demographic detection software. I don't know where that lands on what you're allowed to or not allowed to do in Canada, but I just had no idea that was going on. Does that seem insane to you? In April, the national retailer for Canadian Tire got in trouble for facial recognition technology because you don't actually have a reasonable purpose for it. Yeah, all that data is way more valuable than people think, right? All the social media data that you're the things that you like, this sort of network of friends, the network of different content that you watch, all of these links are so incredibly valuable for advertising. And right now, like, the tech giants are the ones that are getting all of that information. But it seems like Invenda, they want to even grab your data about how you're purchasing things from vending machines. That's wild. That you, without the consent of the people using the machine, they can collect data about that stuff. Data that probably would be hugely valuable to the individuals, or to the individuals using that technology. Like, what should we stock this with? Like, obviously you can get those numbers. What's the highest seller? But like, where do people's eyes go? If there's facial tracking, like, what are they looking at? What's the how many people walk up, look at it, and then walk away? How often do the same repeat users come to the vending machine? How many times do they come in a week? This kinds of stuff is wild. Colin Duffy says, Russell Matthews, I've seen cameras on Walmart self-checkouts, not surprised by vending machine cameras. But at least at Walmart, there's a big screen showing you, at least at the one that I go to, there's a big screen showing you that they've got this on camera. It seems like there's a tacit consent, maybe not consent, but at least you have the knowledge that you're being monitored. the having it like in a pinhole thing in a vending machine seems so messed up to me. Not saying Walmart's use of it is any better. Like they say it's to dissuade shoplifting and whatnot at self-checkouts, but I imagine most of those big box businesses have all of their cameras hooked up to systems similar to this, tracking, okay, what do you use? What do you buy? Like, that's wild, but I think that's the way things are going, and I don't think enough people think about it or talk about the impact that can have. So, yeah, I'm going to be maybe walking up to some vending machines, making some faces into them or something. People I'm with are going to think this guy has finally lost it. He's off his rocker. Oh, yeah, and I found a clip here, recent Joe Rogan talking about Canada, obviously very negative on Canada. Tom Green, noted Canadian, I believe, has a little bit of a defense, which I like to see.
I want you to come to Canada, Joe. I know you haven't come to Canada, but lately. But you got to come to Canada, because here's the thing. I watch the show all the time, so I know your feelings about Canada. But here's the thing, like, everybody loves you in Canada, So I'm coming down here. Everybody's so stoked that I'm here, and
I love Canadians. I just hate their government.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes
Pierre, how do you say his last name? Poilievre?
Yeah, well, it's French, so it's well, I don't think he's French, but the name's French. Pierre Poilievre.
Poilievre.
Sort of a weird R, silent R.
Yeah, it's a strange, as you see it written down, it's very difficult to remember how to say it.
Yeah.
That guy makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
He's so common sense and just calling out all the nonsense that's been done under this administration. It's just so sad to watch.
So this is the thing that I kind of, I guess, just wanted to throw out there, which is, it's not unlike here in the U.S., right? You've got Biden as the president now, right? And then you've got essentially a Democrat. We actually call our Democrats the liberals, right? That's how unabashed we are liberal up there. We actually call the party the Liberal Party. It's not a bad word up there, right? They actually call them the liberals.
And the other ones are conservatives.
And conservatives, liberals and conservatives. But it's the same thing, like half the country hates the party in power right now, just like as much as anybody, and it's just a constant thing, and they want to get them out. And so, it's just I just wanted to, as a proud Canadian, want to throw out the distinction that, Canada's, it's like here. It's the same bullshit that's here. Everybody's arguing about issues, important issues. It's being reinforced, through these algorithms. People get mad about it, then they start arguing. But so, like I sometimes kind of go, wouldn't it be interesting if Pierre Poilievre won the next election, right? Because then all of a sudden we'd have a conservative government up there, and let's say Biden won down here, you got conservative government up there, and then Tucker Carlson might be going up to Canada talking about how great we are all of a sudden, because it just can switch on a dime,
It could go back,
and it has before.
So thought that was interesting. Having the distinction between, okay, Canadians are not their government, and obviously Joe thinks that Poilievre is going to make a difference, is going to be better for the country. Who knows what'll happen? It seems very likely that we're going to get a conservative government in the next election, which, as we talked about today, is probably going to be longer in the future than we might have expected, given this this reaching of a handshake deal between Singh and Trudeau. Yeah, I'm not sure how much I believe things would change under new leadership. It to me just seems like a lot of politicians don't serve the actual people that they're there to serve. And there's other interests that maybe are ranking higher on people's lists, but that's just my take, and I'm just a dude, so I don't know if that's right, but that's just the feeling I get. Yeah, Mr. Whale says, Russell, you need to furnish your room. If you get into this point in the live, you should know I'm probably not going to post over the next week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, in the process of moves. So next time you see this background, probably going to be a little, probably equally as unfurnished, but a new background. So look out for me there, which is exciting. I'm excited about that. It's going to be a good spot, I think. A good spot. But with all of that said, thank you very much for tuning into this live. I think we're going to wrap it up there. I got to have time to go grab a little bite to eat before watching the Toronto Maple Leafs beat the Colorado Avalanche. At least I hope so. If you don't know, huge hockey fan. Catch every single game. People will hate me because I'm a Leafs fan. But we are the Death Star. We are the big team that has so many fans. We're not the underdogs in terms of fan base. But yeah, Mr. Whale saying boo Leafs. But I'm crossing my fingers that this could be the year. I say that every year. My girlfriend for my birthday, which was just a little while ago, got me a sweater that says it's like a Leafs logo, and if you just like caught it on me, you just like, oh, that guy's wearing a Leafs shirt. But on it, I guess there's some store that sells these, but it just says "just once before I die" is inside instead of Toronto Maple Leafs inside the logo. I thought that was pretty good. That's in my regular rotation now. So that's how I feel about it. Just once before I die, I'd bawl my eyes out if they won a cup. But enough about hockey. That's not what you're here for. Thank you, Chad, for the super chat and all the support, all the subscriptions, and all of the likes on these videos help me out dramatically. And make sure to tune in next time when we do this all over again, trying to make sense of what's going on. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll catch you next time. Have a great Saturday evening. We'll see you again soon.